Tenant management, one of the most important aspects of making sure your property provides the return that you're expecting. You got to manage your tenant well. During this video, I'm going to share with you three main tips. Number one, how to market for your tenants. Number two, how to vet your tenants. And number three, how to conduct an eviction. I'm also going to share with you the pros and cons of managing the tenant yourself versus outsourcing it to a letting agent. And I'm going to share with you 10 tips on how to manage your tenant effectively. I educate people to reach financial freedom through property through cash flow positive investments, specializing in the low income multi-let residential market. It's good to think of your tenant like your client. If you keep your client happy, your client will keep paying. If you provide a good quality product, if you're a reasonable landlord, it's very easy to find, attract, manage, and retain good quality tenants because the cost of evicting and finding new tenants is much more expensive than keeping a current client happy. So let's look at the pros and cons of managing the tenant yourself versus outsourcing it to a letting agent. Using a letting agency means you've got an experienced team and you can scale. By outsourcing non-critical tasks, you can focus on the tasks that are going to bring you the best return on your time, which is finding money, finding deals. The issue or the con of letting agencies is that they charge a management fee which eats into your profits. And in South Africa, sometimes it's hard to get a good service. There are a lot of incompetent letting agencies that are currently on the market. And then self-management is cheap. And you get to learn how the market works, how to do the vetting and what kind of trends are happening. But the problem is you don't really have experience and you're not able to scale because your time is invested in doing the admin of managing the tenant. So what I usually recommend to newbies is that you should self-manage your first 3 to 5 deals. In that way, you're able to understand the market. You can see how to pull a TPN credit report. You can do some vetting, look at proof of income, do reference checks. You can understand the process of vetting a good tenant. You can also understand the process of having to do an eviction and doing marketing and management. So you can learn on a small scale how the operations of your business will run. But once you want to start scaling and you want to buy back your time, outsource that to a team because then you can focus on finding money, finding deals, which are the only two tasks that you as an investor should be investing your time into so that you can scale your business. Let's say you get to 10 or 15 or 20 properties and you have to go and manage each one of those tenants. You've bought yourself another job. You've bought your time into doing the admin tasks. So you got to outsource. Once you want to scale, grow beyond, that's when you need to outsource. But in the beginning, it's fine to self-manage. Now, let me share with you 10 best practices to managing your tenant effectively. Number one, you need to focus on screening. This is probably the most important part of this presentation. And if this is the only thing that you learn, then I've done my job. If you can screen the tenant and make sure that the bad apples never get into your property, you don't have to deal with evictions. Number two, use a professional lease agreement. Get a lawyer to draft you an agreement that protects your rights, that has some clauses that it makes it easier to evict the tenant, like a subletting clause. Pay for the professional, pay for the attorney, get a good quality, agreement together, and then move forward. It's going to save you in the long run. Manage professionally with tough love. Now, what I mean by this is you need to meet your tenants halfway. I have tons of tenants that, have lost their job or their boss has delayed their payment. They communicate that proactively and upfront with me. I'm very open to working with them and to give them some time. But if I have a tenant that is not paying, not communicating, I'm banging on his door, the letting agent is banging on the door every other week and he's not responding, then you have to come with tough love. And that is to evict and get rid of the bad apples as soon as possible because the longer they're there, the harder it is to get them out. Make it easy for your tenant to pay. So give them options like a cash option or an easy online invoice system where they can pay online. Provide a good quality product. Make sure that your maintenance is good and that you keep the good tenants happy because there is a fundamental in business that acquiring a new client is 10 times more expensive than retaining a current client. So it's the same thing in property. Your tenant is your client. Make sure you keep the good ones happy and try and limit the turnaround and the churn because that's going to be a lot more costly at the end of the day. Rental insurance is a must-have. There are insurance products that protect you for the case of an eviction and still give you 3 to 5 months worth of rental income during the period that your property is vacant. But this is area and risk profile dependent. Don't overcapitalize your rent. If the market is paying 5,000, you can't charge 6,500, 7,000, even if the property is a little bit more maintained. If it's not in line with the market, you're not going to attract tenants. And it's better to have a unit that is paying 5,000 Rand than an empty unit that could pay 7,000 Rand, but is empty for 3, 4, 5 months while you're trying to find a tenant who just doesn't want to pay. So understand what the market rate is and keep in line with it. Communicate your escalations clearly and in the lease agreement. Now, depending on the area and the economic environment, you can charge between 5 to 10% yearly escalation on the rental. If you have a bad tenant, cut your losses and evict them as quick as possible. The easiest way to evict a tenant is to pay them to leave. If they're paying 5,000 Rand per month, I might offer them 10 grand, 2 months rent, but I'll say, I'll pay you the 10,000, but you leave right now. And as they leave, you change the locks, you make sure that everything is taken out. Now, evictions is part of the game. You need to learn how to do it swiftly and legally. And at the end of this video, I'm going to share with you my attorney who explains the eviction process. Now, when it comes to tenant marketing, this is something that your letting agent should do, especially as you scale. But if you want to start out doing this on your own, that's totally fine. I've got 2 main ideas for you. Number one, you need to use some sort of portal to be able to access clientele. You could use Private Property or Property 24. Here's an example of a building where my letting agent is promoting it on Property 24. So you can see they've put the asking price, the bedroom, the area, and they've got a little bit of sales speech. Make sure that your pictures are professional and that they clearly show what the product is that you're offering. Don't use your iPhone and try and save costs. Get a professional photographer in to take photos, make sure it looks clean, neat, presentable. Because again, what kind of tenant are you going to attract if it looks dodgy? You're probably going to attract a dodgy tenant. And then make sure that your sales speech is quite compelling. Here you can see that they've said a 1-bedroom. It includes built-in cupboards and the bathroom contains bath, toilet, and basin. And then, located within walking distance of numerous schools and entertainment. So just a little bit of sales speak to kind of attract the right person. Now, tenant vetting is where the real meat is. And I've got a couple of ideas for you. First of all, you need to do an affordability check. What does that mean? Do they have enough income from their job to be able to pay for the rent? And if they don't have at least 3 times the rental income, so if you're charging 5,000 Rand in rental income, in rent, they have to be earning 15,000 Rand or more, 3 times whatever the rent is, to determine whether they have the affordability or not. Proof of employment, salary slips, an employment letter. I'll sometimes phone the company's HR department and I'll confirm that the person's working there and that they are, showing up on time and that they're a good performer. Proof of income. So you want to see a bank statement. You want to see a salary slip. Again, it needs to be with a reputable company at the top. So it has to be a credible document. It can't just be an Excel spreadsheet or a notepad. Their credit score, you can go onto TPN, pull a credit report to see how do they deal with paying their obligations. And then payment behavior. This comes through rent rolls or past rental income. So this is where you speak to the landlord to find out, what's their trend of payment behavior over the last 6 to 12 months. Now, TPN is a great tool for you to use, especially when you want to get a credit report. Now, you can see here on the top left that I've pulled a report of a few tenants. This one is a applicant that has got an F score, so probably wouldn't be allowed into the building. Then we've got an E score, an A score, and a B score. So TPN grades each applicant based on an alphabetical score from A up until F. F is obviously the least attractive, A is the most attractive. So here's the report of an applicant that I received and decided to say yes on. Now, I've decided to use this as a case study because it's quite interesting. It's an E score, so you probably in your mind thinking, okay, this is definitely a no, but you have to also understand the detail behind the score. It's not just this score that matters whether it's a good or bad tenant. You have to understand the dynamics behind it. So if I expand their report a little bit more, you can see on the top here, this first box, that this is all of their rental obligations. So POT stands for paid on time and PL stands for paid late. So you can see that while they were leasing in Roodepoort, Gauteng, they were paid on time for many months. okay, in a row, and then their lease again in Rotoport, probably just a change in provider. They again paid on time, and then they had 3 months of paying late and then continued paying on time. So this tells me that this tenant knows how to pay their rental and they've prioritized their rental. The reason they've got an E score is because of their consumer payment profile. They've got ABSA insurance. They've got a Capitec personal loan. They've got a Truworths account. They've got a Vodacom account. They've got a Volkswagen car. And what you can see here is a lot of reds. They're not paying their Telkom. They're not paying their Truworths. And that is what is affecting their credit score. And then I did an affordability check. You can see here that the credit amount, what we're charging rental-wise, is $3,900. The net salary is $28,000. That is much more than 3 times what the person is paying. So although they've received an E score, when you dig a little bit deeper, you can see they've got the right affordability and they're good at paying their rent on time. Whether they're paying their Vodacom, their Telkom, their Truworths account on time doesn't really affect me. It does give me a little bit of anxiety because I know that there's a risk factor that this person could default. They could, if they default somewhere, they could default at your property. But it's clear to me from this report that they have the affordability and that they prioritize rent. So that is why I accepted this tenant, even though the score resulted as an E. This is the $1 million question. I do recommend that you go and look at my Udemy course titled Navigating the Legals of Property, where I do share an extensive amount of information on how to do evictions, both legally and in the not so legal way. So as I already mentioned, there is the not so legal way to evict a tenant. And really what I mean by that is make your tenant's life uncomfortable. So things like switching off water, switching off power, subletting the unit, maybe paying them. That's a really effective strategy, giving them 5,000-10,000 Rand to leave the property right now. And as they leave, you change the locks. Now, you do have to understand that there is a risk associated to doing it this way. If your tenant takes you to court, you will lose because the court will look favorably on the tenant. Our legislation focuses on the tenant, but you also have to understand that doing a legal eviction, which can cost 30,000 Rand plus and take multiple months, that's not justifiable in the low income markets. So it depends on the market that you're targeting and your risk appetite, whether you would go this route. The other route is the legal route, which on average takes 3 to 18 months and will be 30,000 Rand unopposed or more if it is opposed. Now, I'm not an attorney, I'm not an eviction specialist, so let's hand over to my attorney who will explain the legal process.
The eviction process is quite a complicated, lengthy one. What normally happens is we will send a letter to the unlawful occupiers. It's a type of notice letter, and we obviously notify the unlawful occupiers that they need to be out of the property within 30 days. That letter needs to be served by the sheriff of the relevant jurisdiction. If the unlawful occupiers don't vacate the property, then we proceed in drafting an eviction application. It's quite a lengthy application, but once that's done, we take it to the court that the property is in within that jurisdiction. We will then get it issued and then we'll obtain a date. So with the date for the main eviction application, we normally get a date 3 months in advance because there's a lot of stuff that happens in the interim. So once we get the date, the application is then sent to the sheriff and then they serve it on the unlawful occupiers. So in the interim, while we're waiting for the dates of the application, we then bring an ex parte application in terms of Section 4.2 of the PI Act. What that basically is the Act requires us to obtain consent from the court to proceed with the eviction. So while the main one's issued, we go to court on the smaller application. So that application is then issued under the same case number as the main eviction application. We then get that heard in court, so it's either heard in open court or in chambers. And then once we get that order confirming that we can proceed, we take that order and the Section 4.2 notice and we attach it to the main eviction application. That is then sent back to the sheriff. So it will be our main eviction application with our ex parte Section 4.2 order, which is attached together. And then we serve that again on the unlawful occupiers. So that has to be served 14 days before the hearing of the main application. The main application is then heard in court. The order is granted and the judge normally allows the unlawful occupiers 30 days again to vacate the property. So what we do is we then take that order, we send it to the sheriff again, and then the sheriff will serve it on the unlawful occupiers, and then the 30 days that they've ordered starts running from dates of service from the sheriff. If they don't move within that 30-day period, then the attorneys will then instruct the sheriff again to physically evict the unlawful occupiers, and then that's when they'll go again with the order. And then they physically start moving for their property. Okay, so timeline for evictions, everything I've just said is obviously based on the fact that the eviction is unopposed. Unopposed meaning that the unlawful occupiers aren't going to oppose what we are saying. But on average, I'd say that takes about 3 months, purely because we get the main eviction application, we get the date far in advance because of the interim order that we need to get. If the eviction is opposed, that can honestly go on for 2 or 3 years. So with regards to costs for eviction, I'd say with unopposed evictions, our firm normally charges about 13,000 excluding that, which is a standard rate, which will include obviously all the drafting, the advocate's fees and so on, but then it obviously excludes all the sheriff's costs because you use the sheriff quite a lot during this process. So that's if it's unopposed, which isn't too bad. However, once it becomes opposed, it's an up and down thing because your main application is basically a finding affidavit. They can oppose that. Then you have an answering affidavit from them. Then you can have a replying affidavit, and then it's an entire process. So the amount of work that goes into that, I'd say the charges can be anything from 50 to about 180, 200. So with regards to claiming arrears from an evicted tenant, often what attorneys do is they will draft a joint eviction and rental claim application, which is possible. Sometimes with the urgency with regards to evictions, the clients won't ask us to claim that money in because that's normally opposed more than the actual eviction. So we'll proceed with the eviction process, get them out. Thereafter, we can issue a summons for the outstanding rental income. So obviously you can do a joint one, but because often they just want them out, it's easier to just get that done because as soon as people see that money is owed, then they defend. Like they won't defend the fact that they need to move, but we don't want to pay 80,000 Rand of rental income to you.
That brings us to the end of tenant management. If there's a couple things I can leave you with. Number one, you can self-manage and it's a little bit cheaper, but the risk is higher. Only do this when you're doing your first 3 to 5 properties. As soon as you want to scale beyond that, outsource to a letting agent who's experienced, and you're able to then spend time finding money, finding deals, and growing your portfolio. The 10 things to get right to make this a success is to screen your tenants, get a professionally done lease, manage the property professionally, make it easy for your tenant to pay, keep good quality tenants, get rental insurance, maintain market-related rents, manage escalations through your lease agreement, cut bad tenants, and evict swiftly. I hope you enjoyed that video. Give it a thumbs up if you did. Please go and check out my YouTube membership. You get access to exclusive content. I'll also analyze live deals on your behalf. So go check out my YouTube membership for that and so much more.